in the Gospel of Mark, the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. All this year since Easter, we have been working on Mark, and we've only gotten 7 chapters in. We're not making fast progress, but good progress. That's what we'll report. Learning about this, the oldest of all Gospels, even though it's second in order here, it is the oldest and the shortest. It is, we have wanted to give you a couple of quick updates about that. Appreciate Wanda Kidd last week. She just continued where I was in the feeding of 5,000, 4,000 last week in the gospel, and I'm grateful for her filling in. Next week, I will be out again, sort of a surprise. I'll be, my son is flying into Charleston to see his new niece. And so, for family reasons, I'm going to be there. He's my son that lives in Seattle, and I don't get to see him very often. So I'm going down. He's coming in on Thursday and leaving on Monday. So it'll be a quick trip, but I'm going to be there sharing with the family. My wife told me I would be there sharing with the family. And so I wasn't expecting that, but Nick Honeycutt was gracious enough to fill in that Sunday. He's not going to preach from Mark, though. He's going to preach from the fruits of the Spirit from Galatians. So you need to hear that. The story he's already told me about it is worth catching up and hearing about that. So, and Chicago as well is going to be reported about in that. So I'm looking forward to hearing or seeing the DVD after that, I think. Mark, the 7th chapter. I'm going to start in verse 24. From there, Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there, yet he couldn't escape notice. A woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast out the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon, towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat on and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be open." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." This is the reading of God's word. Thanks be to God. I don't know if you know what it means to be an outsider. Probably some of you, especially today, may know that. As you've come to a new town, if you've come to a new football system and what you were used to wherever you were before, you know what it means to be an outsider. I've been an outsider for 2 of the last 4 or 5 weeks. I've been an outsider in large cities in this country. In Washington, D.C., I spent a week with a mission team there, and then a week in the south side of Chicago. And we were outsiders, I guess you'd say, in those places, especially myself. I came from a county over from this one, and I grew up so far out in the country, Daddy used to say we had to go back toward town to go hunting. We were country folks. So living in those cities was different even from living here. I live across the street from a dairy. I didn't see any of those where I was. I didn't see many cows in D.C. or Chicago. They were not close by. There were people, more people on the blocks we lived in than in this whole town. Just on those one city blocks. We were in the cities, and I'll tell you that because a bus stopped in front of the places we slept every night. A city bus stopped. We heard them most all evening. So we were in the city, and I was an outsider. Did okay, and folks were wonderful and courteous, except once in a while driving. I've learned the city is not always like it is out here in the country. Usually somebody will be watching for you, take care of you, but in the city, folks just were in a hurry. Sometimes I wouldn't be sure where I was going, make a cut, and somebody would wave at me and have a finger. I'm sure they meant I was number one. That's what they were saying to me. I'm sure that's what it was. But for the most part, we were courteous, but we knew we were outsiders in those places. Today, Jesus is talking to a Syrophoenician woman. Hard word to say. But basically, she was Greek. She was not Jewish. And to this point in Mark's Gospel, Jesus has been dealing with the Jewish population. Those who were God-worshiping folks, those who knew about the coming Messiah, those who were waiting, had been waiting all this time for the Messiah. That's who Jesus was talking to. So then he tries to have a break. Goes across the sea, gets into a whole different region of the world, people that were totally different from him. And he really just seems to want to retreat, but the word's already out on him, and folks show up. And this interesting situation happens in this place. As a matter of fact, the Jews didn't think a lot of the Gentiles, those who were not Jewish. They would have said pretty bad things about them, talking about them. And the story, you have to know a little of that background to understand the story. They would have called them dogs. Dogs was one of the things they would talk about them because they say they don't care about how they eat or what they eat. As a matter of fact, if you read in the gospel just before this, you'd see there's a whole section where they're talking about how do you get ready to eat. Your disciples haven't been preparing properly by washing their hands, which was an unusual trait in that day, except for the Jewish people, or cleaning the stuff they prepared the food in. That wasn't done in that day. There's a reason God's people survived when other peoples were dying. They were already doing some of those health things that we don't think anything about anymore. But a few thousand years ago, that was a big deal. And it was a big deal to keep God's people alive. But Jesus was trying to explain to them, it's not about those rituals that you do. You do them, and they are healthy and help you, but you have another reason. You think people aren't serving God if they don't do them. You need to wake up, Jesus said. That's not true. But they called those people dogs because they ate like that. They would eat out of anything that was not clean. They wouldn't wash their hands before they ate. So they were called dogs. Hopefully that'll help you understand the story a little more. When Jesus is in interaction with this woman, she comes up to him. Now, he's been dealing to this point mostly with educated folks, mostly with the religious educated folks. The scribes and the Pharisees, the top people that would have been well educated for their day, they would have been sophisticated culturally, they would have known those things. This woman would not have had that advantage, even in her space. Being Greek, she would not have been able to be as educated, not know, especially religiously, as much as those folks he had dealt with before. But she faces off with him and doesn't back down. It seems she goes right at him, but she's ready. Why? It's one of those funny things, even if you're an outsider, a Syrophoenician or a country boy in the city, we've learned there's something that draws us all together. And I believe that's the concern for children. We've learned in these cities where we work that if we're working with the children, they welcome us and treat us like royalty. They love us and take care of us because we're concerned about their children, and they are concerned about their children. Whether you're in the south side of Chicago, or whether you're in Cuba, whether you're in Mars Hill, or whether you're on the border of Mexico and Texas, we're all concerned about our children. So that's brought us all together. This woman is concerned about her daughter. She has a demon and needs to be healed, and she has heard that this person can heal, and she comes and bows down before Jesus, but she doesn't stay bowed long. Jesus interacts with her basically as a Jewish person would, except he doesn't talk direct. He uses a little metaphor there. Listen, why would we bring this healing to you? Not saying you're a dog, but he almost does. Uses that story to say, why would you feed what's come for people to the dogs? And she doesn't even seem to stop for a second and says, but even the dogs get to eat the crumbs off the floor. Now, none of the scribes and Pharisees had gotten to Jesus. She got to Jesus. She was able to hold her own and bring it to a conclusion to say, wait a minute. This coming semester, those of you who are new at school, at collegiate level, will find a lot of people that are smarter than you. Hopefully your professors will be some of those. You're going to get into a situation there where they're going to be teaching you, and not just professors, but others around you, and you're going to find out and be intimidated by them. But I want you to be sure to know, you bring something to that class. That class does not happen without you. Just like the Syrophoenician woman, you need to be there for it to happen, and you need to let your opinions and what you know be known in your classroom. I was excellent at that because I was so, let's say, green when I went to school. I didn't know much when it came to education, so I was always the one asking the questions. And at seminary, I discovered this because the first semester after we'd finished classes, we're signing up for the next semester classes, we were all gathered out in a room outside the biggest room in seminary, and then we had to do it on paper. I know that's odd to you, you computer people, but then we did it on paper. We signed up, and when we signed up for this classroom, or the class we were going to take, I had a bunch of friends that gathered around. They said, Tommy, what are you taking? I said, oh, here it is. And I showed them. I said, why? And they said, well, we want to take what you're taking. I said, why do you want to do that? And they said, because you're not afraid to flaunt your ignorance. And I said, what? And they said, you're not afraid to ask those questions that the professors assume you know, or we all know. And you're not afraid to stand and say, wait a minute, I don't get it. I said, well, I thought that's what we're paying for. And they said, yeah, but most of us don't have the nerve to do that. I realized later that might not have been a compliment. But it's what you're here for. So ask. And you're part of it, and what you add to it is important. They may not tell you that, but it is. It changes the dynamic of what is learned in the classroom. Your part needs to be added to that. Just like this woman who never expected she was going to be the one to stump Jesus, but she did. He looked at her and said, because what you've done, your daughter is healed. Because of the faith you have and the belief she had that he could do it, her daughter was healed. Even the dogs get the crumbs. Then there was this other story tucked in here, Mark tells us, about a man who's deaf and tongue-tied, is what one of the translations says. A man who's struggling. And the interesting part, if you read carefully here, is that he didn't just show up and find Jesus. The community brought him to Jesus. His friends brought him to Jesus. Another important point as you come here to to start your education, hopefully complete your education. You come here, you need to have community. God didn't create us with two hands for no reason. I think he created us with two hands to reach out and touch someone else. And there are a lot of people in this community that want to help you and be connected to you. A lot of them you've already met. You've met coaches that are concerned about your well-being far beyond how well you perform on the athletic field. They want to help and be part of who you are. There are athletic trainers. There are others in that department. There are professors, and there are cafeteria workers, and there are others in the administration, and others on faculty and staff that want to help you make this successful, as well as people in this church and in this community who want to make your time here successful. We want to help with that, but you've got to be able to allow that to happen. You've got to reach out and make community. And the data we know about your age group is two things. We know you're the most connected age group to ever show up to college. The little cell phone you have in your pocket makes you, first of all, more connected to your family and to your friends and to the world, but it also helps you know things that professor is trying to teach you. You can already Google it and find out. But that's not the way it works here. You need to connect. Because we find out as well, you're the most lonely group that has ever showed up at college. You struggle with connecting with other people because of those little things you carry around. For all of us, it makes us all more isolated. You would think it would connect us in a better way, and what we found out is that if you're not careful, it can control your life in such a way that you don't reach out and say hello. You don't look up and meet someone who's sitting next to you in a classroom or in the cafeteria or in church. You don't connect with each other. It's important to develop community. This man was brought before Jesus to be healed because his community did that for him. They bring him before Jesus, and Jesus takes him away in private, which is unusual. But he was deaf. And sure, he couldn't hear and know what really was going on. And so Jesus, and he gets some grief here. According to Elder Trueblood, it's a courtesy thing that Jesus does. Not all the world is courteous anymore. Jesus was courteous here. Took the man off in private, and he touches his ears and spits on his hand and touches his tongue, which seems like, like you crossed a line, Jesus. Why are you doing that? But if the man is deaf, remember, he has a different culture of communicating. I know a little of this. My wife is a interpreter for the deaf. And so she knows how to talk to her with her hands. I know how to read because she does that to me a lot. I know certain signs. She used to go on a deaf retreat right after we were married. There were a church group in the state had this retreat, and they would all gather and come together for their young people, for their teenagers, so they could get some community there. And she used to go as a counselor on this retreat. And it was a great weekend retreat, and she'd come back exhausted, just absolutely exhausted, and say, Tammy, what is wrong? Why are you so tired? I'm sure you slept well with all those deaf children around. She said, are you kidding me? I said, well, they can't hear. She said, so when you listen to music and you're deaf, guess what you do? You turn it up so you can feel the beat. And she said, and they can go to sleep with it turned up. And we have to go out there in the middle of the night and turn it off. I didn't know that about that community. Never thought about that. Didn't know. Jesus was keenly aware of the man that he was healing. Did what he needed to do to communicate with him. And then healed the man. Healed the man of his deafness, of his tongue-tiedness. Took care of him and changed his world. And then we're told, he tells the man, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. He was already having trouble getting away from the crowds where he was before. He'd come across, and they already knew about him where he was on the other side of the water, and he was saying, don't tell anybody. Don't get this out. I'm trying to keep this down. And the man does what? Goes and tells everybody. Doesn't keep it a secret at all. He goes and tells everybody. Because when our lives have been changed at that level, that's what we are supposed to do. I think that's what we need to do. We need to go and tell everybody what it means for us to be a Christian. But the problem is we probably don't need to use words to do it. Most of us have trouble with that. We like to talk. I'm a great example. We like to do that. We like to tell people. The true way we tell people is what change happened to that man. How did he go on with his life after being touched by Jesus? That's what the world is waiting to know. I told you I'm a soccer referee, and a couple years ago, about a year ago, I was refereeing a match in my home community. And went over there, don't know anybody really over there anymore, and was checking in at the school, and the assistant principal had the same last name as me, so we started checking, do I know the same people? And he found out we weren't related, but he knew my mother. My mother was a 39-year veteran in the cafeteria at my elementary school. She was a lunchroom lady, but she cared about her people. And that's what I found out from this young man, or he was assistant principal now. And he had to tell me a story about a jar that he had in his house. He said his son recently, who's small, about 6 years old, was needing money for something. He found that jar, and it's full of 50-cent pieces. He says, just a simple mason jar full of 50-cent pieces. He said, you wouldn't think anything about it except that your mother gave them to me. He said, she knew I struggled, our family struggled with having enough food for the weekend. So she said on Friday, she would walk by my lunchroom table and drop a 50-cent piece into my pocket. And he said, I kept those 50-cent pieces, now I have that. He said, it helps me remember that there are always people that are struggling out there. As I'm sitting here at this high school, and that child that's in my office and I want to pinch his head off, I have to remember. And he said that jar of 50-cent pieces helps me remember somebody out there that God's put in my world is struggling and needs me to help them, just as your mother did. And my mother never talked to him about Jesus. My mother never named an evangelistic plea to him, but he knew. He knew by the way she lived and what she did, what she was representing. I think that's what Jesus is getting at for all of us. Share that, what's happened in your life. Share with others that are around you. The most important way you'll do it, probably the most important way it's been witnessed to you, is by how you live your life in the locker room, and in the dorm room, and in the lunch room, and any other room you happen to find yourself. How you live that life will be the biggest witness for the Jesus you serve here. And then your tongue really will be untied. Let's pray. Oh God, so often in our lives we get so busy talking, we don't even remember what we're sharing. So many times we forget that the way you changed the world was not just by speaking words, but living your life so that it might be modeled for others. Help us as we follow you to remember you call on us to do just that in our lives every day. To live as you would have lived, among those and touching those that most needed to be touched, helping where we can help, being called on to serve and responding. We thank you for that model you put before us and pray that we might also follow it. For it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. In just a moment here, we're going to stand and sing our hymn of response. Hymn number 97. You may have a response today, and it may be just where you stand to really take seriously that call God has laid on your life, to share by how you live. Also, you might have a different response. Maybe God's placed a special calling on your life that you need to share. I'd love to hear about that at the front. Maybe Christ has called you to a special, to put him first in your life. By watching this baptism today, something has triggered that in you, and you want to talk about that. I'd love to talk about that with you. Or maybe this place to make this faith community your faith community. I'd love to talk to you about that. So whatever decision you have, whatever response you would have, as we stand and sing our hymn together.
Every knee shall bow.
remind you the instructions for those of you that are eating with us. You can come out this door, make a hard left, and go downstairs. You can go out the back doors and turn right and come into either of those doors and go downstairs. The fellowship hall is immediately underneath you. The line will be at this end. There's some of you going to stay and help greet those and talk with these guys, and that's great. We're excited today. We got to celebrate Kai and his baptism. That was wonderful. Speak to him as you go. And as you go, maybe make a new friend. Speak to someone. I guarantee there's someone here you don't know. So make a new friend today. Let us bow for our benediction. As you go from this place, go in the hope of the Holy Spirit, from which there are no boundaries. As you go from this place, go in the peace of Christ, which begins in your life and spreads out to this community and into the world. As you go from this place, go in the love of God, which swells up in your heart and spills over the places where you live, work, go to school, and play each day. As you go from this place, go in the hope of the Holy Spirit, the peace of Christ, and the love of God to serve the Lord together. Amen.